Okay.
Nope, not yet.
I'm just gonna go back there and turn something on. I think it's the recording.
Done.
I think.
Now you're right.
Here she goes.
Okay, the date is Tuesday, January 30th. It is 7 minutes after 2, 2024. It's call to order.
Council President Kaiser.
Here.
Councilmember Christiansen.
Here.
Councilmember Murray.
Here.
Councilmember O'Meara. Not here.
Okay, the information item is number 1, Municipal Systems Capacity Workshop. We have the city engineer and PW director. Should we get started?
Thank you, Mayor Hutchison, council members. For the record, I know you all, but I'm Amy Woodruff. I'm the principal of Civil Dynamics, the city's engineering firm, appointed engineering firm. We're going to talk about the status of the wastewater and the water systems today. We've been talking a lot about wastewater, so let's start with wastewater. Overview of the existing wastewater system. Okay, let's look this way. Overview of the existing wastewater system. The wastewater system is comprised of two basic subsystems. There's the collection system and the treatment system. The collection system is 7 lift stations, about 50 miles of collection main, over 1,000 manholes. That transports sewage to the wastewater treatment plant. The wastewater treatment plant is comprised, first the sewage goes through the headworks, then it goes up to the treatment, which is an SBR, through the UV, ultraviolet, which disinfects it, and then discharges into the Boise River via Mill Slough. The city's wastewater treatment plant is operating on a permit issued by EPA in 1999. That permit was administratively extended in 2004. The capacity of the wastewater treatment plant is 8,064 EDUs, that's what it's currently rated for. And it is an SBR system, sequencing batch reactor. That system was constructed in 2013, and it was upgraded from aerated lagoons, which were existing when I took over as city engineer. Next slide, please. Capacity, what is it? Capacity is comprised by a whole basket of components, and it's normally a figure or a number that comes out of a model, a computer model. So it isn't a number that I derive or that Jason Van Gilder derives. The NPDES permit plays into it, the wastewater components. We know that municipal sewage has a different complexion or makeup than, say, sewage from a cheese treatment plant. Flow, the amount of hydraulics, the quantity of flow, the temperature of the sewage, the temperature of the receiving water, the type of treatment, in our case it's an SBR, the type of disinfection, the ultraviolet or UV, and the weather. We know that the bugs that do the treatment at the plant function best when the weather is very mild, not too hot, not too cold. So all of those components, those primaries and more, go into the model, and the model rates the plant. Normally, the rating is per MGD. The treatment folks use millions of gallons per day. We're going to use EDUs. It's just more intuitive for us to talk about how many houses. So that's what capacity is and how it's derived. I want to point out this graph to you. This is very interesting. This is a diurnal graph, and it is a graph of the flow to the plant over 24 hours. So it starts at midnight there, and you can see the flow decreases down through the morning hours. Really intuitive, many toilets flushing. Then it starts picking back up as the sun starts coming up and as the day begins. Then really steadies out over the course of the day. I was a little surprised. Some communities have a higher morning peak. Middleton isn't as high. Really? Then it stays pretty solid over the course of the day, then trends up in the evening when folks get home from work and start using their homes and that type of thing. Then it turns back down and ends at midnight on that day. So that's a diurnal flow curve, and that's what the flow looks like as it goes to the wastewater treatment plant. Next slide, please, Jenica.
So,
Yes, sir.
could you back up just for what are the trend lines below it? There's the blue and the red.
I knew you were going to ask that.
Okay.
I knew it. They are just lines that are on that graph that we didn't have time to take off. They're a value that we didn't take off.
So there's no relationship to that as EDUs that are allowed and EDUs used, anything like that?
No, there is not. No,
Okay.
there is not. Go ahead, Jason, maybe you want to.
The straight line would be if you took all that flow during the day as one straight average, okay? So if you're one
Right
constant
here.
flow, the
Right
blue
here.
line is, right.
Right across here.
So the left side is the low, the right side is the high?
It's a trend line.
No, it's a trend line. So the first hour, if you're at 15 gallons per minute as your average, the first minute you have 15, the next minute you have 30, the next minute you have 45, 60, all the way through the day is that blue straight line.
Okay.
The red line is if you add up the flow actually coming in. So you'll see the line starts about the average there at midnight, you have 15, and then we go down to say 10, so now you have 25. The next you have a 5 gallon flow in, so you have 30. Now you're down to 2 gallons per minute, 32. So you have a lot less flow. Your cumulative average over the day decreases, but then it picks back up and they eventually
So
meet at the
it's
top.
purely a metric of use.
Correct, so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, next slide. So we have been managing sewer and talking about sewer for many years. The city of Middleton and sewer are old friends. Just to give you a little background, 2018, EPA gave authority or primacy to DEQ for discharge permits in Idaho. DEQ subsequently followed up with the city and said, hey city, we're gonna issue an IPDS permit to you one of these days very soon. This is 2018, you're number 2 on our list. The city started moving forward proactively with wastewater planning. Now, that included the wastewater facility plan, but it also included the pilot study, which is a way for the city to manage effluent by applying the water to crops. It included the Mill Slough Water Quality Improvement Project. That's a project whereby the city removes sediment and phosphorus from the Mill Slough flow and uses that as an offset or a credit against future city phosphorus production. So those things started in earnest in 2018. 2019 rolled around and the wastewater facility plan was completed. Keller Associates did that. The wastewater treatment plant was rated in that study at 1 MGD. 2020, we started seeing very significant growth. And we believe that that was coming out of really COVID. But growth really started picking up, seeing more applications. 2021, the treatment plant flow started bumping up and above the 1 MGD. Took a second look at the wastewater treatment plant. It was re-rated to 1.5 MGD and 5,882 BDUs. The city also started aggressively mitigating for infiltration and inflow, I&I, you hear that a lot, and started a project to remove Piccadilly Park off of both the sewer system and the water system. And they also began to proactively plan for a new wastewater treatment plant. In 2022, the wastewater treatment plant was re-rated to 2.1 MGDs and 8,064 EDUs.
Could you say again, MGD is million gallons per day?
Million gallons per day. And so 2.1 million gallons per day roughly equates to 8,064 EDUs of capacity. Councilman, I usually, yeah, so that's the rating.
Question.
Yes, sir.
Are you telling me that our wastewater doubled in 3 years? Because we went from 1 MGD in 19 to 2.1 MGD in 2022.
That was the plant rating, Councilman.
The rating of the
That was
plant,
the
not our
rating of
actual
the
flow.
plant.
Okay.
So when you go back to that basket of components of capacity that went into the black box and out came the plant rating, that was the rating.
Okay.
Okay? So, next slide, continuing on. So, currently, planning, where we're at. There are 4,913 lots that are either existing flushing toilets flowing or that are building permit eligible. There are 3,389 lots that are planned. Okay? To give you a frame of reference as to how long it takes for that many lots to work through the system, the city of Middleton over the last 5 years, on a low year, would issue an average of 250 permits per year. On a high year, and I think there's only been 1 year that the city has issued this many permits, they issued 400 permits per year. So based on those two growth factors, we're gonna do a bandwidth. So the 3389 divided by 250 equals about 12 and a half years for that many building permits to work through 3,389 lots. If we look on the shorter end and 400 permits per year, that's about 8 years of building permits. Okay. The capacity of the existing plant and that bandwidth is very closely related to the city's wastewater treatment plant upgrade, but it's not the city's wastewater treatment plant upgrade. The plant upgrade is a very closely related but separate subject for you. The plant upgrade will require that new IPDES permit will need to be issued. The new plant will have to meet the IPDES permit, and the new plant will have some capacity over the planning period above what's in the existing plant. Okay. So that's the planning to date. Next steps, wastewater next steps.
So the 3389 are all lots that have an approved DA. Is that correct?
Those are lots for which a preliminary plat entitlement is in place. So they may or may not be accompanied by a development agreement, but they are preliminarily platted.
But the city's expectation is that they will go into final plat. And we have to consider that in our planning as they are planning to do that. Is that correct?
That's just an excellent question. Yes. So those lots do have an entitlement from the city. And we consider those lots to be planned, and we consider that capacity to be planned. Now, many things can happen, and they're all dependent upon factors that you don't control, and I don't control. How many of those lots will never make it to final plat? I have no idea. In 2007 and 2008, there were literally hundreds during the economic downturn. And the last thing on people's mind was sewer capacity. Okay? In 2020, when the city, every city, Caldwell, Nampa, Middleton, Star, every city was receiving multiple applications basically per month. Demand was just going through the roof. Then capacity was on everyone's mind. So, did that fully answer your question?
Yes, but again, still learning the process.
Yes.
So those preliminary plots, do any of them have a horizon date? Meaning, if they don't get converted or they don't go into the final stages, some of them I've heard over the past, there's a 10-year or some kind of a horizon date.
We changed that, what, 9 months to a year ago, so that they have
Yeah.
sunset. So anything that happens after, about a year ago, I think, right, Roberta, is when we put those sunsets in.
The code prior was 2 years, so if they don't keep moving and they stall,
Yeah. Yeah.
Their plat dissolves on their phasing or their first phase, and that's still the case even under the new code. We just kind of freshened it up a little bit about a year and a half ago. It's 2 years if they stop.
Preliminary
So
plats,
I wonder
yes.
if a third color under that 3389 might be the ones that have horizon dates.
I would say they
Because
all
that,
have
that I think
horizon
would be
dates
a
at one.
planning
When we were
metric,
done, they
right?
do.
Yeah, Councilman,
No, no,
I
that's-
just want to confirm that with my, I would say the vast majority of that 3389 all have a horizon date of one form or another, either captured in a development agreement or standalone. So it's either 2 years for one plat or 5 years if their development agreement was negotiated as such. And I don't know that there's any that are 5 years, I'm just giving you an example.
Okay.
But I would say all of those have a horizon date.
So I guess where I'm leading is there's no way that we can use that horizon date in our planning for what we have allocated to go into other, like, new projects or whatever.
I think the city right now has been focused on taking care or serving the existing customers, the 4913, and also working through the commitment that they made to the other 3389. Jason, you can speak more to this, but the city does have a wastewater upgrade underway, actively underway. I don't know where that's gonna fall in the 8 to 12 years. If the permit is issued next year, that's going to accelerate the timeline of the wastewater project, right? If that permit is issued in 4 years, then that's how the timing is gonna go forward. So when I said the upgrade is related to this build out 250 to 400, how many building permits are issued, it's different as well. It's different as well. So,
Well, you kind of see where I'm going here.
Oh,
I'm
absolutely.
trying to see
absolutely,
if there's
no way
any, if
to
there's
avoid-
anything we can push or pull
yeah.
You can't until they sunset, because it's guaranteed up till that point.
up to the point.
And you might not see them do anything, they could walk in the day and say, I'm ready to pull permits, and that's guaranteed to them.
So the next slide, Jenica. So going forward, no, what back, Jenica, I'm sorry. Sorry. No, I didn't choose my words right there. Wastewater planning and next steps. Annexations that come before you as a body, city staff will not be able to recommend approval for those at this point. So that's one thing that you'll be seeing going forward.
Amy,
Yes,
I'm sorry to interrupt. As we've been talking administratively with it, that would be residential annexations. There is an annexation coming before them next week that I would be recommending approving.
yes, thank you for clarification. Thank you for clarification.
That's an average.
Commercial.
And you can, yeah, it's commercial.
Oh, I've got a question.
Yes.
So, how do we predict, or how rather is the difference between residential and commercial quantified? Is commercial lumped in with EDUs? Because commercial, Jack in the Box might have 2 or 3 toilets, but they see much higher use than a toilet in Rob's house because there's people coming through. So do they count as a higher number? Are they quantified differently? How does that work?
The number of EDUs for each lot is assigned at building permit, and the commercial lots, we don't know yet what's going there. We do know that the bulk of the commercial lots that have been developed, Bozic, Riverwalk, those are included in the city's calculation, and that's just part of that dynamic process. We don't contemplate that the Dairy Queen will tip the city's balance one way or the other.
No, but are they considered to be a higher number than a residence?
That is a great question.
That's what I meant.
They are not. Every installation is evaluated based on the water meter size. And if it's a 1-inch meter, there's a certain draft that the 1-inch meter can flow
Okay.
And that's the upper threshold of where they're considered in the capacity analysis.
Okay.
Yeah. And they may very well flow less, but they're paying for 3 EDUs.
So if you have a commercial, sorry, if you have a commercial though, because I'm looking at, I know what you're talking about, I saw the sign, so I was kind of happy for that guy coming in, but where he is an 8 to 5 versus a 12 to 24 hour Jackson's, Jack in the Box, whatever, but then you have an 8 to 5 business that because of whatever they might do might require the bigger meter or the bigger water flow. So they're gonna pay at that higher rate and be calculated higher as well. Even though their usage in terms of our sewer system isn't gonna necessarily be,
May not correspond with the peaks.
may not
that we
correspond,
currently exist.
but that will take away from that number is what I'm getting at, okay.
So related, we have this many EDUs as we are currently configured. We have this many EDUs that are planned. What is the delta? Meaning, do we have EDUs left to go to business and so do I use it?
The city's capacity is planned. It's currently planned.
Okay.
The capacity does factor in, I would say, the bulk of the developments that we're aware of. Roberta just touched on Maverick. Maverick's contemplated. Annexations would be future residential development annexations.
So the reason I asked is it talks about annexations here, but projects within the city, or we talked about infield projects and different things. It isn't just annexation, it's within the city too. Is that what I'm hearing? Okay.
Not really a related question, but I just thought of it and I'm curious since you're here. I don't know what we're supposed to call it, what the PC thing is, the trailer park that's going in right on the edge of town here. Those are not permanent trailers. So how did we calculate the usage of transient homes, trailers, whatever you want to call them? How did we calculate that?
DEQ has a number that we use, and it's 1/2 of a house. Each of those RVs is considered to be 1/2 of a house.
But since they're transient, we can never guarantee, I mean, it could be full all the time. There could be times where we have 3 weeks and there's one trailer in there, so
So
that's really a lot of wiggle room in that. Sorry, I'm just thinking out loud there.
It is, and we plan for them to be full. We expect them to be
Yep.
full. If they're not, then we'll see it on that curve data. But the city's commitment is that they're full. Yeah, Councilman. So continuing on, we talked about annexations. In the next month or two, you're also going to have before you a rate study. And that rate study is gonna look at the monthly fee that the city is currently assessing for sewer service, and that's gonna be citywide. The operation and maintenance of the system, including the short-lived assets, should be captured in the monthly use fee. The rate study will also look at the connection fee. The connection fee is the equity buy-in into the existing system. Connection fees aren't well understood. I'll just give you a very, very simple example. If the replacement value of the city's whole wastewater system, collection, lift stations, manholes, all of it, were $1 million, and that system could serve 1,000 dwellings, 1,000 EDUs, then the connection fee would be $1,000. The connection fee is the fee for the equity buy-in for that EDU's piece of the plant, both water and sewer. It doesn't contemplate the actual meter installation. It doesn't contemplate the connection from the main to the house. It's simply the amount of capacity that's removed out of the plant for that standalone building permit. Okay? That's the connection fee. And it's based on the replacement value, not the future value, the replacement value. Okay? So the rate study that comes before you is going to look at all of the fees that the city is charging. I don't know, I'm just gonna pause right there. I don't know that that'll be adjusted up or adjusted down. The bulk of the communities that I work in don't collect enough money to fully fund their systems. They just don't. So usually a rate study adjusts the rates up. But I'm not going to assume that. I just added that for you. It's a rate study. And I think these folks are gonna have a fresh set of eyes that'll be good for the system. I would anticipate, I don't know, I shouldn't say I would anticipate anything. That's gonna be before you, okay? And the final thing that's gonna be before you in the next interval is funding for the future upgrade. Planned expansions are funded many different ways. Grants are one way, and there's many different kind of grants. Principal forgiveness with DEQ, congressional appropriations, we've been very successful with those. Rural development has a good grant package. So we're gonna be looking really hard for grants. Savings, the money that the city has accumulated through connection fees in the past, that's gonna be looked at closely. And then a bond or a loan to make up the difference. So once the city decides what kind of upgrade they're looking to do, expand their existing plant, I think the city's well underway with the sewer project. How much does that cost, and then how are we gonna pay for it? So those are the things you can expect for next steps.
Might be in the newbie dumb question category, but has there been, in terms of our max capacity or our max EDUs in our facility, has there been any regulatory change to how that number is calculated over the last year, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10? In other words, the number was here 10 years ago, but because of regulatory compliance or modifications, that rate has diminished.
That is a great question. That is a great question. And we've seen that on not this system, but we have seen that happen on other systems. The city's existing permit, okay, is one of the primary components in the capacity analysis. We anticipate that when the new permit is issued, it will necessitate a treatment plant upgrade, okay? So the city's existing system will no longer be able to meet those permit limits, and the city will have a number of years to get that in place, okay? Whether that's 5 or 10, typically it's 5, to get a new system in place. The capacity analysis you're seeing here doesn't contemplate any change in the discharge permit. That's
To date.
the short answer to your very direct
Okay.
question.
Okay, good. And, not good, but thank you.
Yeah.
So when's the next permit horizon date, or is that something you're gonna talk about? When is the new permit being issued?
We have seen the list of the permits that ITDs or DEQs anticipated work plan for their permit writers. And we are number 2 on the list and number 1's on hold. So we know we're near the top of the list. We have had discussions with them about mid last year or early last year, and they tend to indicate we were one of the top 5 they were gonna work on, and each one takes about, or they do about 2 per 6 months, so we were about 2.5 years out from early last year. Again, it's just a rumor. We have had some contact with them, and they know we're doing some, we've got some pilot study things going on that they wanna see how they affect, and so it wouldn't surprise me if it showed up in the next 6 to 9 months. It also wouldn't surprise me if it showed up next year. It wouldn't surprise me if it showed up in a year and a half from now.
And so no idea when?
We don't have a clear date. They usually publish a draft permit and let us comment on it for 6 months or so.
And once we get it, what's the compliance time?
That will be in the permit, and we won't know
So
until
we
we
don't
release it.
have any guess.
Years ago, we had I didn't, but I believe there was some discussions that there might be a couple permit levels that are 5 or 10 years in there to get to, but we've kind of been eating up those 5 or 10 years, so it's hard to say.
Thank you.
Well, it's my understanding, regardless of, take capacity out of it with these new permits, we were gonna be required upgrades anyways
Yes,
to meet the new
yes.
phosphorus, temperature,
Nitrates.
nitrates.
Our plant as configured will not meet those.
So, yeah, I mean, take, so the EDU question is one thing, but then to understand that even if you shut it completely down, the new
It's
stuff's gonna have to happen.
something done, yeah.
Hence the pilots, projects and those type things.
Since we went down that rabbit hole, what roughly is the value of the pilot project? Not in the value of the land, but if the pilot project were shut down tomorrow and we had to replace the functions performed by it with machinery, chemical, whatever else, what would that value be? The cost to the taxpayers if we had to use traditional methods?
Ballpark estimate, the tertiary treatment section of the plant. So we're building some primary clarifiers, we're building some aeration basins, we're building some clarifiers. There's a third step behind that, that's some filters, very fine filters that remove our phosphorus level, even low to the extremely low levels that we're required to remove it to. We are leaving that step out of what we're designing right now, partly because we want to, it's very good to test those on your process, but do what's called a pilot study on those. So you have a vendor bring in a certain filter, and you run your medium through there, and you make sure it really does the extreme removal that you're counting on. We're thinking that we may be able to achieve that with the pilot operation. So there's at least 3 to 5 million type range in that tertiary filters. The real gem of what we may be able to achieve with the pilots, with the full reuse permit, is temperature. If we get a temperature requirement on our permit, which we anticipate, we know Boise is working with it right now. We know that there's temperature concerns on the Boise River through here. We anticipate that would be somewhere in the permit compliance. It might not be in the first 5 years. If you have to get temperature, you're building large chillers and cooling towers to cool your wastewater before you can put it back in the river. If we can take it to the farm and land apply it, that saves us both a huge capital amount, and I hesitate to guess what kind of that would be, but also a large O&M energy cost in running a big refrigerator down there.
So that would be an initial cost savings by doing it this way and a residual savings.
Yes,
Over
you are really positioning yourself well for your horizon, what's on the visible horizon, with the pilot project.
If you could just give me a ballpark of the accumulated savings, I know you don't want to, but
Yeah.
I'm not gonna quote you and hold you to it, a ballpark that it would cost to replace.
Let's say 3-4 million in the tertiary filters, 10, 15, 20 million in the coolers, chillers, and then another 100,000 million a year in just energy cost to run.
So low end 10, high end 20 something in savings?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the residual cost of well over 100,000 a year in just energy, electricity bill,
Chemicals.
Yeah.
chemicals.
Yeah.
Which is a hell of a thing to keep off your annual budget.
Yeah.
Sorry, we rabbit hole,
That's
but
the ball, a pretty good ballpark. That's not to say that the farm will not be without expense. We're now gonna get in the farming business, and we're gonna be doing it in a way that's going to require us to manage it like a treatment process. So we're gonna need to harvest alfalfa when it's not ready harvest it because we have to have that field ready at a certain time. So there are things that would be associated with that pilot project we're gonna grow into. But we think this is a very,
Yeah, it ain't gonna cost us 20 million to farm it.
no,
Well, just open it up to everybody with a goat in the community and they can. Goats.
No, because they will have excess leaving their body.
yeah.
Well, it's true, it's not taking it away.
It's fertilizer for the alfalfa. Anyways.
It's a potential to make a little bit of money.
Release to a farmer.
Release to a farmer, basically so he can keep the fields green and and
The net overhead is going to be far less than
yes.
the benefit.
I think their question leads into it, what we would lose financially if the bypass goes through there.
It could be, yes. I would have to know how much land was there, and we really don't have a per acre specific laid out, but yes, that's one of the considerations we want to consider.
Mayor Hutchison, this might be a good time to think about having a workshop, informational type of question and answer about the pilot study, about the Mill Slough project, because it really extends to other parcels around there. The city could continue the reuse on the Bike farm to the south. I'm just adding information, and I think it would really benefit mayor and council just to understand the reuse and the pilot study component of the wastewater treatment plant upgrade in the future. It really is a very powerful, compelling component, and it's worth understanding. So this group can make a decision either way. It's worth understanding if there's other property in the area that could be looked at in the event the bypass does go through. I just think it's good information.
So, Jason put together a grant, and I had the privilege of signing it the first week I was in office for the upgrade for a new
Yes.
sanitation plant. You want to talk about that?
That, we submitted 2 letters of interest to IDEQ. One of them is for their state revolving fund loan program. It's a loan/grant program. That was for loan money to construct the treatment plant upgrades that we've been talking about. It's very unlikely that we will be successful on that one, but it's good to have our name in the ring, and we never know. They may just decide they have a whole lot of extra money that they didn't picture. So that's one of them, and we anticipate being a little more competitive next year. And perhaps they'll have a little more funding, but we'll be well positioned to, again, take that funding application forward. The other letter of interest that we submitted was for a planning grant. And that planning grant is to expand our, or create a reuse program for the city that would allow our wastewater effluent to be land applied on our land. Currently, we're doing this on just 6 acres under a special permit for just the pilot study. This program would allow us to land apply effluent on a larger area. As we own several more acres, we could expand that to that larger area. And then let us grow into that program. That does some other things about saving us some permitting steps as we try and renew our permit for a pilot project. And it's just a logical next step for our overall project.
So my understanding about 5 years ago
Yeah.
was this same upgrade of 80 million in today's dollars was about 35 million. And that the study that we're doing on the 6 acres was not a Band-Aid, but something to get us through until we were forced to go to the next level, which is now gone from 35 to 80 million. Can this Band-Aid of property, 6 acres, continue to keep growing and growing and growing as our city grows? Are we gonna have to eventually do the 80 million and upgrade?
You are going to have to do a plant upgrade.
And my understanding is somewhere around 4 years from now.
We will have the design done within this quarter,
Okay,
March.
okay.
We will then look at how to fund this and obtain funding from a number of the sources that we mentioned earlier. Yes, and we have some history on the cost stuff that we can share with you next year. I think we have learned some things over the past 3-4 years. We've had some inflation in there, and the 80 million is a couple more years of inflation before that.
Okay, that's considered into that price?
So that, yes, so we are not the 35 million range. We do have some reasons why we're not at 35, and they're.
So what I'm understanding is if the, 5 years ago, if we'd have spent the 35 million and not done the 6-acre pilot property, or pilot program,
Yeah.
we would have saved the city, what, $55 million? And we can't go back in time, but we can think, if we don't make the right decisions now, where are we gonna be 5 years from now? And with the EDUs, back to Mark's question, we have 8,063, was that the number I remember? 64 EDUs, and some of those are in the queue, and they're yet to be built, but they are platted. And if they drop out of the queue, then that will open up, whether it be 12 houses or 200 houses, that would open us up to allow some people to be annexed in and get into the queue. Is that what I'm understanding?
We may not recommend an actual annexation. We may just recommend the city hold that capacity in the event.
Okay.
I don't know if Fred Meyer wants to locate or something.
Good.
So,
Observation, yes.
I'm sorry, Mayor. We would ask the city to just take each application as a standalone application.
Okay.
so to that line of questioning, true, false, with the new permit, our current EDU capacity, is it possible that that EDU capacity, given no change, would decrease, thus causing us to have to spend the money on the upgrade regardless?
Yes,
Is that what I'm hearing?
yes.
Okay.
Yes,
So the $80 million is gonna have to be spent one way or the other.
yes.
Just, if
Yes.
nothing happens, and we think it's probably likely that the EDU capacity will go down
Yes,
because the regulations have changed, we have a foregone commitment to that money. Is that what I'm hearing?
we are marching, yes, that is.
Okay.
I wanted to continue with something Jackie was talking about, but not, are you almost done? Or can I wait like a couple minutes and then talk, or do you still have 30 more minutes to go? Because we keep distracting you.
I'm done with sewer, so it's a perfect place if you have a sewer question. We're gonna talk a little bit about water before I conclude.
Okay. You talked about a Band-Aid and about costing the city 55 million, and I'm not understanding any of that, so I just want,
If we had done this upgrade of 80 million 5 years ago, it was 35 million at that time. At that moment in time, 5 years ago, it was 35 million.
What, can I
That's-
ask where you got that figure? I
From
remember
the
it being-
mayor?
I remember it being
From-
60 million, but are we splitting hairs here? or-
Well, let's go with
Okay.
60 million, we'll give
Okay.
you the benefit.
Okay.
So by putting it off, it was 20 million. So it's 80 million now. If we put it off for 6 years, which we can't, it'll be 100 million at that time. So we just keep kicking the can down, and it's gonna cost,
Can I ask another question for clarity? There's two things we're talking about. One is the temperature change, the changes in the output that were going to be a cost regardless. On top of that is a capacity change. So the $80 million has to do with capacity.
That is one of the
60 million
changes.
or whatever it was back then
Yes.
was the federal or whatever state, wherever the mandate came from, for temperature and the phosphates. So the phosphate, the gland was a reaction to the temperature and the phosphate to mitigate the cost of that.
It was,
Am I understanding that correctly?
that's, yes, there are a number of factors that got us from that number 35 or 50 a couple of years ago. And one of them is that in 2021, where she mentioned, we relooked at our projected growth and went from a ultimate design projection of 16 or 14, I'm not remember, but that type of range or I think it's more than 8 or 10,000 EDUs. Once we redid that projection in 2021, looking at the higher
So-
growth rate, we're now at 16,000 EDUs.
So my point is that I believe we had two different issues, not one. Okay, so we had at the time, I don't know which administration it came in, the reaction or the $40 million or whatever $1 million it was savings was intended to be erased by virtue of using the property to lower the temperature, or increase the temperature, or eliminate the phosphates. Nothing to do with capacity. Am I hearing that correctly?
I don't know that I can speak to that. That
Okay.
was before my
But
time.
then the 80 million that we're talking about is in addition to or on top of the amount of money that we're having to spend for the temperature and the phosphates, if I understood correctly.
It will do most of the phosphorus, so it's not, it's going to do a
Meaning the
lot, but it won't
project,
get us all the way there.
meaning the project or the 80 million.
The project will get us, they're targeting,
So the capacity increase, the cost of that is the 80 million? Does that include part of the original 35, 60, whatever million as well?
so let's actually back up a little bit on the $80 million cost.
Okay,
We have a design that we did, we have a facility plan that was started in 2019. It was updated in 2021. 2022, we settled on a facility plan for the 2040 design. That was basically a 20-year design life for a project. That talked about us doubling to basically 20,000 by 2030-ish range and 40,000 people by 2040. Okay, so that's a big number. We've then, as we started that design process, we started with a project engineering report that TO has done and submitted that gets us that whole project, the 2040 plan. We also looked at that and said, there's a somewhat of a chance that about half of this plant doesn't get used for the, until 2035, 2038. Longer range. Is there a more targeted plant that we can build right now? So some things that make sense to size for the whole plant. For instance, at the very beginning, we have some screens that screen the grid. We're gonna put 2 of those in because we have to have one, we have to have a redundant one. For those, it's gonna make sense to do both of them size for 2040. Okay? We have some tanks that will have, 6 sections, or 3 sections of tanks that will, nitrification tanks where the bugs will grow the bugs. We need one, a redundant one. We're gonna look at pushing the third set out to more of our horizon, where we think we'll actually grow into it. We need 4 clarifiers in the full build out. We think we can build 2 of them now, or I think we need 3 clarifiers in the full build out. We can build 2 of them now and finance that third one, like the other things, with some of these connection type fees as we grow into those things. So the 66 million is really the number that they've come up with. That's our estimate for the first thing we need to build, which is the headworks, primary clarifiers, equalization basins, aeration basins, clarifiers, UV system, provisions for our filters if they come back, a solids handling press, some pump stations. That's our initial build is in the 66 range. Adding 4 years of 4% inflation gets us to around that $80 million number. Now that's also got, I was talking to Jim yesterday, that has 20% contingency in it, which is not an unreasonable number, but is conservative given that we're getting closer to that design number. So we are aiming to be correct on those numbers, not low on those numbers. So that's some clarity on the overall numbers that we've been hearing here today. I hope that's clarity. Maybe that's just more confusion. Councilmember Murray.
I hate to drag this out more. I want to clarify one more thing.
Yes.
The pilot project, as it exists today, is not part of our actual treatment plan, correct? In terms of when we calculate our capacity, the pilot project is separate because it's experimental. It is not part of the process.
Correct.
As you're talking about.
Correct.
So I don't want to conflate those two issues. The pilot project right now is separate. Moving forward, if we get approval and it continues to be successful, then it will become part of our entire plan, right? And
Yes.
part of the actual process. Okay.
I want to summarize very simply. The capacity that we're talking about today is related to the upgrade, but it's not driving the upgrade. The city's new permit, which may be next week, it may be next year, and it may be 3 years from now. I've been talking about it since 2012, talking about it in earnest since 2018. The city's new permit is going to necessitate a different treatment plant. Okay? That new treatment plant will be required by the Idaho code to have some capacity in it over the planning period. And the reason for that is real intuitive. This thing needs to last for 20 years, so it needs to support a 20-year concerted growth, okay? The existing EDUs will be included in that plan, but they're not the reason that the plant will be constructed.
So I have, just for clarification, the city is recommending that we no longer allow any developers to annex into the city at this time
Based on
on the
existing
EDUs.
plan.
Okay.
New projects.
Residential.
Okay,
We're clearly not recommending new residential.
Okay.
We know the council has
Commercial is
prioritized
different.
commercial and industrial, and we would
Right.
like to consider those on a case-by-case basis
Okay.
as they come through.
okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Can we move on to water?
Well, I'm sorry to be another, whatever you want to call me, timeframe. I know you've talked a little bit about time frame. So here we are today. Both time frame and any additional property required to do the upgrade that we are seeking to do. The system upgrade to bring the EDUs up to the capacity that we need. Does it require any additional acreage to build or to make happen? And what time frame are we looking at to get that from today completed? Do you have a kind of an estimate? And then where's the money coming from?
We have a design for what we need for the plant.
Okay.
Being completed right now, the council authorized that, I believe, early last year or late 2022. That is wrapping up first quarter of this year. We'll have a design set on the shelf that we'd like to build and approved through IDEQ. So we are, that will not be really the critical path. We have the process of funding that will be obviously a challenge. The first step is the rate study that she mentioned. We will have that contract to you on, it's already on the agenda for February 8th. They will be a couple of months to talk about what our rate options are moving forward. Finding other funding sources is an ongoing issue. And then a bond election for people here would be a step after that. I don't know if we have that pinned down exactly.
Okay.
So,
One final,
No additional acreage though, sir. No additional acreage. we
one
can
thing
do.
you really have going for you well, maybe almost the two great things you have.
Best I've ever seen.
Is you have room at your treatment plant.
Okay.
Those old lagoons that they did,
They'll be no longer, so.
they will be filled in and the new thing can go there.
Okay.
That, when you work on treatment plants and you have to go in and dig around all the pipes and try and fit it in while the plant's operating is a big challenge.
I hate to be
The fact that you
Looks
can-
like we got the man on the job.
The fact that you can build this on what is essentially a greenfield site is huge. And the fact that you own land next door that you could land apply this to is also one of the biggest benefits to the city that
Kind of a security.
just every other treatment plant wishes they could do this.
Sorry, I'm done now.
I was just thinking, well, I have a question, but I was just thinking, I'd hate to be the guy with the backhoe that went in the wrong place in the situation you're talking
Yes,
about.
yes,
Him and that guy that hit that gas line, they'd have to move in together.
yes.
So one final question, capacity and everything else aside, in order to be granted a renewal on our permit or a new permit, whether it's renewal or new, whatever, a lot of that, if not most of that, is driven by regulatory change over the previous 20-some years, yes?
Yes.
We have to upgrade because we need to meet new requirements according to regulations from the Fed and from the state, yes? So it's not due to the system failing or neglect of the system or poor choices made, it's regulatory changes from the Fed and from the state. And in order to meet those requirements, we have to upgrade. Capacity out of the picture.
Correct. New
Okay.
studies have been done on the Boise River that
Driven by
allocate.
the Hells Canyon complex, driven by the Hells Canyon
Okay.
Dam complex, and it's just come straight up the river.
Which dam complex?
The Hells Canyon Dam
Okay.
complex. And the Boise River TMDL, the total maximum daily load, is what has driven all of the new permits on the Boise River, Boise, Nampa, Meridian, all of those. We're just the furthest downstream, and they're working their way down.
Okay.
And it could be worse if we were on the snake.
Trust me, I've been listening to Amy talk about, first it was phosphorus,
Yeah.
and then temperature showed up out of nowhere and said, you better get ready, it's coming.
And the good news is we're not the only ones that have to work on that.
Oh, no.
plug in a bunch of giant fans down by the river.
Big refrigerators.
So how do we turn into this regulatory body that can just impose new rules on cities that cost them fortunes of money that have no dog in the fight?
So when
Beyond
when the permit is issued, I would say you will be the second group of people that will know. Public Works will know, staff people will know, and within not very long after that, mayor and council, well, mayor, you'll be the first one to know, so it'll come to you. Council will know. And that will put in action all of the machinations we're talking about. It'll be very well posted.
We just need to start thinking about it and planning for it now. And that's why we go through those 3 items that you listed.
Yeah, yes, correct.
What do you think we should do as far as time frame on those 3?
You might not have been out of the room, but the rate study will be before the council here in February 8th, 7th.
Okay,
So we can move forward on that.
okay.
Grants we are actively working on. We have a TO engineer, or Dura, formerly TO, who's doing the design. They have some excellent permitting coordinators that we're working with that helped us write the grant that you signed for the service state revolving fund. We're well positioned for that next year. They have been working with the Army Corps on some preliminary permits for that. We've done some environmental studies that will position us well for those, being ahead of those studies. We are doing a number of things.
So what we might consider doing is reaching out to those cities that have already gone through this and done the upgrade, and how they worked through it, and what worked for them and what didn't work for them, and any financial opportunities that they found. Do we know of any city that did Star in the last 2 or 3 years upgrade?
They don't have their own
City of
water
Star doesn't own
treatment.
their own.
So do we know of any cities that,
Star Water and Sewer has upgraded.
Okay, that's a
A
private.
little while ago. They're sort of their own thing. Boise is doing some upgrades. They're doing a underground injection well stuff on the other side by Micron to take some loading off their plant, and they're doing,
Is that the place that has deep pockets?
yeah, they're
How
doing
much
some
deeper
things
than
there.
Middleton's?
Napa is in the middle of a huge upgrade for their plant. Parma, or Casey Kellerman, who's our contact with Dura, has done a number of projects with Parma to get them through there. I have some other contacts back in Washington that are going through phosphorus, and they had some nitrates in the big sound study. So we're fairly well connected with
Okay,
the region
okay.
of what's happening.
okay, thank you.
I move that we move on to water.
I second that.
Okay, thank you, Jenica. Next slide, please. The existing water system. We've talked quite a bit about the city's existing water system. The groundwater resource is very robust in this area. We intend to keep it that way. The city has 6 wells online, 1 large reservoir, 2 booster stations, Powder River and Falcon Valley, 2 intertie stations, about 65 miles of main, and hundreds of fire hydrants. The city has 3 pressure zones, very intuitive. The upper pressure zone is up on the bench. The high school is included in that, all of West Highlands. The east pressure zone is east of Duff. Mayor, that includes your neighborhood. And the lower zone is below the bench. The bulk of the development is in the lower zone.
Oh,
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Obviously, I'm wrong, but I swear I remember having 10 wells. We only have 6?
We have 6, yeah, we have 6.
they're numbered 1 through 10.
They're numbered, yeah.
Number 1 is abandoned, number 2 is at the site where the old reservoir is that hasn't been used in years. and
Okay,
years.
so we have 10, but we have 6 that are active in
Yep.
use. Okay, sorry. I was like,
another
I
well?
swear I remember 10. Okay,
Is there
sorry.
another well being drilled?
Todd Campbell is gonna drill one if they approve that. Farmington Hills, that'll be our 11th total and 7th active. Yes, okay. Sorry.
No, That's interesting, that struck me as well, the numbering of wells. Thank you. Capacity, water system capacity, what is it? Similar to the sewer system capacity, it's a basket of factors and considerations. There's the drinking water rules, there's the actual well flow, storage volume in the reservoir and how that's parsed out, generators on each of these wells, wells that are out of service. DEQ requires that the system be looked at with the largest well out of service and the smallest well out of service. The individual pressure zones are looked at, water use demand, we have average day demand, peak hour demand, max day demand, and fire flow is a huge driver for capacity. That all goes through the model and comes out in equivalent dwelling units. How many homes can the city provide services? And the capacity for the water system is looked at from the entire system, kind of holistically, and then it has to be looked at per zone, okay? So that's the capacity considerations for the water system. Background, we've been talking about water for a number of years as well. 2015, well number 7 was added to the city's system. Well number 7 was constructed years before that, but it had never been added to the city system. That's the well that's down south of the river near the Idaho power lot. Former water lead, James Askew, Public Works Director, and Mike Martin from my office in 2015 got a project underway and tied well 7 onto the system. It was a great day. 2018, well number 10 was added specifically for fire flow protection. Did you have a question?
No, I think O'Meara
I think
just showed
O'Meara
up.
just-
Oh, yes, he did.
Oh, wait for it.
Hey, Councilman.
She marked you tardy, Tim.
Yeah,
I'm sorry to interrupt
can't
you.
help that, I'm afraid this time.
So we're just talking about water, Councilman, and we're kind of in the last few years of background here. You missed the excitement of sewer. Dang.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Well number 10 was added to the system specifically for fire flow protection south of the river. 2019, a generator was added to well number 4. That increased capacity. 2020, the Falcon Valley Booster Station was added. It was constructed and permitted, and the east pressure zone was created.
Amy, add why a generator would increase capacity, because that's a bit an odd thing.
A generator would increase capacity on a well because the well could be considered to be never out of service. So if the well doesn't have a generator, then it's not considered, even if it's in the rotation and in demand, it's not formally in the city's capacity calculation. Okay? 2022, the city's master water plan was completed. That was done by SPF. And 2023, really aggressive project. Jason and Public Works in my office worked on this, maximizing the interties. Those are the pressure reducing, pressure sustaining valves that transfer water from the upper zone to the lower zone and allow water to go back and forth. The upper zone has a number of large, what we call boomer wells, and we like that to be able to transfer to the lower zone really efficiently. And that was an increase in capacity. Next slide. Planning. The city is actively working with the water system planning. One of the biggest efforts we've undertaken is, I call it a water conservation, but it's really utilizing the surface water resource that's attendant to the city parks. All of the parks have a surface water right with them. And we have a campaign or a project underway to build irrigation pump stations similar to what developments bring on that will use that surface water resource and leave the groundwater resource in the ground for a future culinary use. What that does, as well as helping with conservation, is it also helps the city with their water tracking. The city is required to track and report all of the water that they pump. And we call that water that doesn't go through meters, we call it unaccounted for. It's not necessarily unaccounted for, but it is unbilled. So we're really working on water tracking and tightening how the city manages the water. It's not mismanaged now, it's just not tightly tracked, or it could be more tightly tracked. Feel free to jump in there, Jason. That sounds like Public Works isn't doing their job, and that could be for the future. It also improves flow between the zones. Again, we've got that upper zone transferring to the lower zone and the east zone, and that's optimizing those intertie stations, okay? The facility plan identified a number of capital improvement projects, and we've been pretty active kind of working through those, Jason and I, and planning for them. Number one was a leak survey. Number two is the tie from the existing system on the north side of the river, the bore underneath the Boise River, and tying into the system on the south side of the river. So it's a redundant connection under the Boise River. That connection is included in the Quarry East Development Agreement, and they will be completing that connection at a future date. Roberta may have that phase, but I don't have it. They'll be completing that at a future date. Convert well number 6 to a potable supply, and then add generators to 2 more wells, well 8 and well 5, I think that says. Those are the top 6 improvements, and the city is actively working on those. Okay, next slide. And water next steps. Annexations with just a water extension, city staff would not be able to recommend approval for that. The EDU analysis is ongoing. The work that we're doing with converting the parks to their surface water right, all of that, maximizing the intertie, all of that goes to our EDU analysis and declining balance. So that's kind of a dynamic process and actively underway with that. The rate study that comes before you for sewer, that will also accompany the water. The rate study will include the water system.
It is not right now. No, we are just doing sewer right now.
Okay.
Once we get that, that's the priority.
Okay, water or sewer and then water.
Correct.
Okay. Council, you will have a future rate study in front of you from water, and it will look a lot like the sewer rate study. And it will work through the monthly fee, the base fee, the variable or per thousand fee, per 1,000 gallon fee that the city charges, and also the connection fee, which is the equity buy-in. The water connection fee, this may or may not interest you, is also drives the sewer connection fee. We know that a 1-inch meter, about 90%, maybe even 98% of the water that goes through the meter ends up in one way or another going into the sewer system. So that's how the sewer connection fee is calculated as well, based on the water meter size. Funding for future upgrades, we're always looking for grant opportunities, always looking for grant opportunities. Savings, that's that connection fee and banking that for a future water system replacement or upgrade. And then a larger water project, I can't think right offhand if the city has a large water project that they would undertake. I don't believe they do, I'm just thinking. But one of those may be the Boise River Bore if Corey hadn't agreed to do that. In other communities, we see loans for well development or a booster pump station or a large reservoir, and folks will go out for a bond for that. So those are the primary ways that future upgrade would be funded. And I promise the water would be easier, so.
So I have a real quick question. We have 10 wells, 7 are active. What's going on with the other 3?
Well 1 was, I think, behind the old city hall, the one, this side of the street of I don't think we own the property.
Police station.
That's
Yeah,
15 Dewey.
15 Dewey, that I don't think is
They're so
viable for
old,
so
they're
long.
abandoned.
Well 2 would be on the site of where the old standpipe reservoir is on about 2nd Street and Viking or so. And that we studied a couple years ago, I saw a report that says, they tried to see if they get some more water out of that, and they said it wasn't viable to get that water out. That water right has been transferred to our other wells, so.
Okay,
There is, well, 3 might be up at the other side of the site, where well 4 is. I saw a map somewhere that showed a well there, but it's not.
so it's not that they went dry, it's just they went old.
Obsolete, I would say.
Hard to say, yeah.
The pump went out of it and.
Yeah.
So did you say we still own the property that they're on?
I think we own
We own the well itself.
2 of the 3 properties. I'm not sure about well 1. I'm not even sure where it is. Entirely confident where it is. I'm pretty sure I know where it is, but
I think it's where the old Right Now building used to be, but it's not Right Now anymore. But it's where they used to park all their Right Now heating and.
So there's a well down there next to the creek?
Behind the old
That's
jail.
where it is.
I think so. I think I saw a map somewhere that that's what it was.
I can pull some Google Maps if you want.
Yeah, it's-
What role, if any, does the water tower still play in our water? Is it in use? Is it sitting there empty? What's it doing?
The one in town?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
it's
well too.
non-functioning.
Yeah, it plays no use in the water system. We rent out the space to cell towers.
Okay.
And use that for our own SCADA.
We do,
Yeah,
correct.
telemetry work.
So am I understanding correctly that as of now, city cannot recommend annexed properties into the city for sewer and water, or just sewer?
Yeah.
We would not recommend annexation with water only
Okay,
and developing with septic systems. The water system in the city is robust, but we're
okay,
watching it closely.
okay, great, good distinction, thanks, I
As
didn't
we
catch
make
that.
these system tweaks, then the EDU count, which is more dynamic than sewer,
Okay.
will establish that.
What about the possibility of communities with self-contained systems? I want to say Avamore does their own. There's a few examples in the valley. So if they come to us with a proposal for, it would have to be a large community to justify this. So let's say 600-700 homes, and they want to do self-contained systems. So what would happen?
Would they even annex?
And Avamore is a little bit unique. They did contract with United Water and brought a water main over multiple miles, and they do have an on-site membrane treatment system. I think the city would just have to look at those on a case-by-case basis, and I'm speaking a little bit for planning, but the city hasn't been approached with that, and we just need to understand what was planned. Is hypothetically, Councilman, is the developer proposing to construct an on-site project-specific water system that would be dedicated to the city when it became contiguous? Same with the sewer treatment plant. Would DEQ permit something like that with a centralized plant 5 years down the road? I think all of those things would need to be understood before the city developed a policy.
Any more questions? Yes, sir.
Jason, what's going on with the pump station out at Hillside, or Falcon Valley, or what do they call it, Viper Park?
I think that's the one we call Falcon Valley,
Yeah.
the booster pump station.
Yeah, well, I know it's built into a hole and you guys can barely get in and out of it. What is the plan there?
Yes. I believe there's some site work that we're looking at as to moving the pumps in and out. Whether we get an internal gantry crane, it's not ideal, but I don't know that we're gonna raise the lift station or adjust the grade some other way. It's a bit unfortunate the way that came out, but I think we can work around it.
Okay.
Mayor Hutchison, council, thank you.
Okay, thank
Amy.
you. Any other questions or any comments?
For you, Jason, so for a good couple of years now, I've been very happy that we have generators for our wells, because then in case of emergency, people still have
Yes.
water. It just occurred to me when we were talking about it now, how much fuel do we have for those generators? How long can we make those generators run if there were an extended emergency without electricity coming from Idaho Power?
Yes.
What's I know the county takes over in terms of emergency planning, but how long can we operate those wells for?
Yes. I believe, and Amy could probably give me a better rule of thumb, but there's a day or two of generator run time in the tanks.
In the tanks that are on site
Tanks that
there?
are on site, correct. For a long and extended duration, we would be probably bringing fuel to them to
So
refuel them as they go.
if we had to do that, we would have to call one of the local companies and have them bring one of their refueling trucks like they bring to Jackson's, and they,
That would be one way to do it. We have one pickup truck with a tank on the back that we can do some temporary fueling. Again, the problem is the same problem with our sewer lift stations. Those run on mostly diesel generators. There's one or two that might run on natural gas power, which has its own issues. But again, it's how long which leads to the other question of if we have a long outage without power or fuel, how long are our city crew trucks gonna run without supply of diesel fuel? And that's gonna help us help others, as our Vector trucks need diesel fuel, our backhoes need diesel fuel, our one or two of our larger trucks need diesel fuel, and the rest of them need natural gas, or not natural, but unleaded gas. We might wanna think about, and we have looked at in the past, can we get some backup storage of fuel on site at our plants, or at our shops area? There's some challenges to that, and it's not cheap, but it's something it's worth thinking about as a council together, so.
in our agreement with the county for emergency response, are we guaranteed anything? Or is it just when it's 911 time, the county takes over and we hope they take care of us? Do we have any kind of actual agreement that says the county will do for us anything specific, or is it just?
I don't know of anything. Mayor Rule had talked about, there was some agreement with the gas tanks, because he was in the gas tank business, that they would keep, the bottom 3 feet of their tanks would be saved for us, but he kept telling us that was all full of crud, you didn't want that gas anyways.
You'd be changing your filters out.
We did, a year and a half ago, enter into a Idaho Water Assistance Network agreement. That's a generic agreement with water purveyors go to Idaho, and then that even ties into a national agreement with water purveyors where we will provide mutual assistance on sort of a voluntary basis. So it's possible we could get some assistance from somebody in Oregon or somebody in Salt Lake City or Western Washington or somewhere outside of our zone, but it is a question worth thinking about.
So I'm watching these school buses drive by. Do they have tanks down there that they draw from, or do they, I just can't imagine them going to a gas station.
I don't know.
That would be a
They
good,
have some tanks down there, and I don't know how often they're filled, but they have some gravity-fed tanks.
well, we need to talk to Superintendent Gee, because if that situation, which we all fear would happen, the schools are gonna be closed, and that fuel would be an opportunity.
As long as it's diesel fuel.
Right, but some are unleaded and some of them are diesel.
We have
So-
regular gas trucks.
Yeah,
Well, and I hate to bring it up, but I'm pretty sure there's still some underground tanks, which may or may not be usable, down there behind that mechanic shop, and that's why they've had such a hell of a time selling that place, because you know what I'm talking about,
I've heard
right?
rumors
The
there's
white
cracks in
building?
them.
Huh?
The white building?
Where
Yeah, I
would-
guess yeah, I think so.
Across from the barber shop?
Yeah,
Yeah, that was an old service station. They never removed the tanks.
yeah, so if they're serviceable,
It's the same with the building across the street from Jackson's, that old, it used to be a
They
gift
moved-
shop.
They did,
Yeah,
and
the
that
tank-
old house they moved, isn't that why it's up for sale again, is there's rumors there's tanks below that too?
There is tanks below that, it used to be a fuel station.
Yeah, I wouldn't trust those tanks, but. yeah,
Well, 'cause they're
they've been
old.
Around for a long time.
It's probably not the solution I'll recommend to the council.
The rust still is combustible.
so.
I think
so
the
maybe
school is-
Maybe we should look at amending our agreement with the county and get at least a few guarantees in terms of, you know, keep our lift stations operating, so we're gonna need X gallons of fuel to operate for a 5-day emergency. We're gonna need X gallons of fuel to operate city vehicles. What do you guys think about that? Just
Yeah,
amending
they
that
don't have the
agreement?
same emergency we do.
Not huge asks, just some concrete minimums that if
Well, because the
something
county is
happens-
gonna have to take care of Nampa and Caldwell as well.
Well, they're always gonna get.
We're
That's
gonna
what
get,
I'm saying.
we're at the bottom of, I think we should talk to Superintendent Gee. The schools would not be running,
We need to be self-contained.
And,
Yeah.
and your police cruisers are gonna need gas too.
Yeah.
So,
And more importantly, lift stations, water, and police.
Yeah.
There's your big three.
Well, our
Yeah.
fleet's not gonna get any smaller, I think we ought to start looking at what is our own facility.
That's what I was just saying. We need to be
Yeah.
self-sufficient.
We've got room down there at the shop if we wanted to put in some tanks. We've got
Just-
plenty of room. down
It's an
there.
expense.
We have done some work to look at tanks and different things down there. It's been a while when Ed Harris was here. He was looking at some fueling, gravity fed versus a lot of different things. So we have to just restart that process, but I agree. A certain amount of reserve is probably warranted to keep the city going, especially police and water. Gravity should flow a little bit, sewer should flow, if they can get a flush in there. So it's probably a good look going forward.
I don't know anything about these things, but if sediment hits the bottom 3 feet, do we need to, if we did something along this line, do we need to keep using them? So that you have
Big gravity
movement.
fed something until, but yes, you would need to move it because
Okay.
gas has a shelf life.
So we could move our city vehicles to there
Yeah.
and have our city vehicles fueled at cost versus retail.
Yeah. We have to look into that,
As
see
long as
what the
Middleton
fuel by the
becomes a
bulk
farming
would cost.
and avoid a lot of the
The
regulatory
vehicle's
stuff.
bad too after a while. How do you do that?
Well, we'd use it for city vehicles, so we would buy bulk fuel.
you,
But at a well, I mean, how do you?
Well, those generators pop on, once a week or a
Yeah.
couple
Oh,
hours?
so they're using it, okay.
Yeah,
They're not
what,
fueling
for 2 hours or
systems.
something? Is it 2 hours they run on?
Yeah, a couple hours.
something like that.
And before we dismiss, I'd like to have added to the agenda for the next meeting, a discussion on some of those code changes we made, the
Oh. The,
food truck, sorry. God, my brain just died. The food truck code changes we made because they are affecting Latte Da. And
So-
I'd like to discuss those.
I also, and since you brought it up, I think there should be a distance between a food truck and a brick and mortar business. The food truck over at Piccadilly Park that sells ice cream
Mhm.
is,
Mayor, sorry to interrupt, I request
Table.
that we be careful about
Okay.
talking about non-agenda items.
Okay,
So definitely a
done.
conversation that can be had if we notice it properly.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I wasn't trying to have any,
so
I
that'll
wanted
be the
to
discussion.
add to the next agenda that we discuss some of these things.
So noted.
I apologize. So are we done?
And Mayor, I have a question also. And it's going back to sewer. Am I gonna get
You might get
I
stabbed.
I thought since we're thinking out of the box, I thought it earlier, but I thought out of the box thinking is sometimes good. We talked about Star. Star does not have their own water treatment plant. They contract out. So, in the process of time for us to get our treatment plant up, is there any systems with a capacity that they want to provide that somehow we can tap into to give us a relief valve. In other words, is it possible? Whether they have capacity they would want to provide to us, I don't know. But connection-wise, gravity and all that.
Sewer, that is very difficult to do, mostly because it goes downhill and it's set to go downhill. Your pump station's kind of pumped in.
Star just put a
One
really nice
direction.
pump, just,
They're just a
Few hundred
little
feet
that
from the
size.
house.
I don't know that you could, it would be cost effective to set a pump station on our eastern side that would pump to their lift station where they could get flow. I don't suspect they would be particularly interested in taking our
I
flow.
imagine not.
Water
But I had to ask the
systems,
question because I know that they do it, why couldn't we?
water systems back in Washington, it was much more common for systems to have interties between systems, so that if one really lost pressure, it could be fed from another system. I don't know that we have any systems that are close enough to actually do that with us.
Well, I know the subdivision I live in, it's only not even a half mile from their pump station. But whether it's got the gravity feed that could feed into that, I don't know. But I know that all the property on the other side of Kingsbury is pretty much the same elevation that we are at. So if there's a portion that we could allocate off and sell to them, again, I don't know if it's capacity, just thinking out of the box. Is there a relief valve that we could go to maybe?
Sewer, I don't.
Okay.
We could take a quick look at how far you'd have to reroute your force main from the Lakes of Tulaga pump station to get to a Star sewer main, but it would be a distance.
Okay.
And it would only be a very small portion of our overall system that we'd be conveying to them. And I suspect they probably wouldn't take it without annexing the whole property into Star because they want to be,
They wouldn't want to do that, would they?
yeah,
So, okay, I just thought I might ask. Thanks.
Forgot there was some fire hoses and.
Yeah.
we'll try.
Okay. Any more questions? Any more ideas? Any more thinking out of the box? Okay, let's adjourn. It's,
3:39, yeah.
39. I'm dying to use that, come on.
I know.
All right.
They should have used it.
It's not really,
I know, I just don't think about it.
my mom exploded.